Welcome to HeartWired, Emotionally Intelligent Leadership for an AI World, the podcast where technology meets humanity. I'm Dr. MJ, your host. Today's guest is an incredible educator, distinguished author, and CEO of Mastery Coding with an award winning K to 12 computer science curriculum, Alan Sitomer.
Hi, thanks for having
Hi.
me, Dr. MJ.
I'm so happy you're here. I mean, this is amazing. I appreciate your time and your effort, and I've done some reading about your background, and oh my goodness, you are an incredible being. Thank you for
Well,
joining us.
in the world of AI, can you trust any of it?
I can. Even our brief conversation we've had previously, definitely. So let's. Anything you want to add before I start? I that
No, no, happy to be a guest. I mean, we're living in a world that's changing so rapidly, that I'm sure it's gonna be kind of a dynamic conversation today.
Yeah, I think so too. So, Alan, you had this incredible journey from being a high school English teacher, and then you became the California Teacher of the Year, and now you're leading a company, Mastery Coding, which is like really on the edge of this AI revolution. So, what was the moment when you decided to start Mastery Coding?
It's a great question. I think that my background, is that I taught in inner city LA, and all my work, my books and my speaking engagement, they were predominantly sort of working with schools that had, disadvantaged populations, with a lot of disengaged but incredibly capable kids. So the idea of if you could awaken their passion, their interest, their curiosity, like they were irrepressibly gonna go for it. But school is riddled by a preoccupation with standardized testing, where Sally went up the hill with 5 apples and Mikey went up with 6 apples and they came down with 18 apples. And, and that's how they teach ratios, etc. And then they categorize, if not demonize or shame kids based on sort of their performance in an environment that is sort of one size fits all, when we all know that one size doesn't really fit all. So the notion of having a front row seat, because I live in Los Angeles, to sort of Silicon Beach, where you're seeing society just shift, technology change everything, and schools, and I'm certainly not bashing schools, but we're reactive more than we are proactive.
Mm,
And to make the kind of curriculum shift towards where I feel we should be studying, as opposed to, we have an extraordinary focus on like Mesopotamia in, 4th and 5th grade, right? Like, the fact that I know as much about aqueducts as I do, it's almost, they like, in one hand, I get it, the humanities, etc., has importance, but this is to the exclusion of teaching HTML, CSS, JavaScript, any emphasis on computer science, coding, algorithms, etc. And that dynamic, I am of the strong belief, needs changing. And so, like, I can either wait for other people to do it, or I could kind of find some like-minded people and, pick up a shovel and start building something myself. And that's kind of
mhm.
the genesis of mastery coding right there.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you have so many different things that you're doing. And you mentioned that you're on the California Department of Education Task Force to incorporate AI into the school system. So, tell me, we're talking about emotional intelligence. So, how does that role fit and your role in that making decisions that are really going to affect millions of students? How does emotional intelligence come into play?
So, well, the first thing I think how emotional intelligence comes into play is that to embark on this kind of endeavor, the first ingredient has gotta be humility,
Mm,
okay? Anybody who tells you that they know what's happening, what's gonna how the impact, the collateral sort of impacts of these things, we don't right there. So, being, um thoughtful and, humble, and there's a lot of smart people with whom I get to interact, which is great, but hubris is a really big concern, and one of the things that big technology in general kind of does, it's ready, fire, aim, and
mhm,
that is almost antithetical to emotional intelligence in a way, right?
yeah,
So, but
absolutely.
progress, it's almost like it's an arms race in a way, and there's a rapacious hunger to be next, to be new, to be innovative, to be bold, to be cut, and, nobody is measuring twice and cutting once right here, we're just cutting right there,
Yeah.
and then we see what was cut, and then we adapt right there, and then there's tropes that are move fast and break stuff, right? Which on one hand, it's a mentality that I get, but on the other hand, there are things that you might break that are unfixable that we nobody wants broken. And there's no regulation. There's no there's no accountability, right? So the idea of what emotional intelligence looks like as applied to artificial intelligence, there's a lot of ethical considerations, which brings up a cascading question of, well, whose ethics, right? I mean, that's the other side of things, right? Do we apply the ethics of this cultural group or this cultural group or so, like nobody has these answers. And so your question is just almost like one of those Russian dolls that you keep lifting up the thing, and there's another doll inside, there's another doll inside, there's another doll inside. And I think that a great part of the conversation has to be recognizing that we're consistently asking questions that are met with new questions we've never asked.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that whole thing with, well, going back to emotional intelligence, that whole thing of, like, having that social awareness, but you're having awareness not just of, like, in a room, but you're having awareness of this entire group of people. You're having the awareness, and then you're having to make those decisions that have that feeling of empathy for what is this gonna do to somebody? How is this gonna affect those students? How is it gonna affect the teachers? And so you really have to kinda hone into that social, awareness, social management type of
It's interesting to hear you say that because I honestly don't feel like we may have authority, but decision-making power is still, like, almost determined by the forces of capitalism.
Mm,
That's kinda what rules, it's remarkable in that there is, like there's nobody at the steering wheel of this stuff who
yeah,
has the ability to say, "We're gonna turn left right here at this intersection." Like, nobody has that. Even the multi-billionaires who are at the front end, they starve for that control. They want that control, but they do not have it. It's like it's almost like mother nature, like the weather is going to be what the weather is going to be, and we've got to adapt and respond accordingly. We can try to predict, but we have tornadoes, we have hurricanes, we have floods, we have sunshine, we have rainstorms, all, and we don't get to determine what the weather is. We have to live in it, and there's a lot of, I think, what's going on with technology right now is also feels a lot like that.
Yeah, so how do we bring in that human quality? That kind of thing to think about, the other, think about, your values. Like you said, it's hard to kind of focus because whose values are you working from? But still, you're working from a place of doing good as and making sure that you're doing the best. So how do we bring that into this world?
I mean, these are the deepest of philosophical questions. I don't have other people's answers, right? That's the one thing, is that I have a lot of self-reflection on these issues, and then my own answers. Like, to take my ball and go home and not participate in a dialogue, I don't find that to be an answer. On the other
Mm,
hand, to stand up and demonize other people who don't believe in what I believe, that also I don't think is an answer. Um, so engaged civil dialogue driven by informed sort of perspectives seems like a rational way, but we're also living in an era where that kind of engagement around any issue is less appealing to folks than I've ever seen it be before. I do think, though, there's a pendulum swing that is inevitable, because I think that there's the lion's share of people are sort of fed up with the extremists at any side of issues. And I think we're looking for more of middle ground and centrist perspectives on things like that. And that I think is what speaks to me more anyway, is that I find, like, where can we see how we are alike? Where can we compromise? Where can we find common ground? That is a much more appealing approach to resolving kind of the challenges that we all collectively face, because generative AI is presenting challenges for all of us, no matter who you are in this. And so that would be the way that I try to engage with conversations like this.
okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that whole thing about being in dialogue is gonna be important. That's why I started these podcasts, is because I wanna start people thinking about it and talking about it, and, because that's where we're gonna see the traction, for sure. So, I'm gonna kinda shift a little bit and ask you about, um, you mentioned the United States Academic Esport League. What exactly is that?
So we live in an era right now where, if you are familiar with teenagers at all, or even younger, right? Video games, I mean, they have moved into that realm of beloved by this generation of student. And so these video games avail, as an educator, an opportunity to illuminate that they're really just gigantic STEM projects, just gigantic STEAM right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, right? They're driven by code, they're made with graphic design, they're entrepreneurial endeavors, there's operations, there's finances, marketing, publicity, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity. So the United States Academic Esports League offers an esports league much like a basketball league or a football league or a baseball league, where kids can participate, play their favorite games, compete, and gain all the benefits on that you know, that we've reaped forever from engaging in team sports, but we have an academic component where you can find like, hey, I like to tinker. I like, well, all these games are played on hardware. Perhaps IT professional sort of study. This could be a career opportunity for you to learn about right there. Or perhaps you're into health sciences and things like that. You know, these top gamers and things like they're paying attention to nutrition, to sleep patterns, to hand-eye coordination, to augmenting cognitive development for reaction time, you know, and so all the different careers that I've mentioned in the past, you know, couple of minutes are workforce opportunities. So we're living in an age where you heard me speak earlier about connecting kids in a meaningful way. So we channel kids' passion for video games into career and college readiness through the United States Academic Esports League. And it's kind of a design that is a win-win scenario for the kids. They love the games, they love play. The energy is sky high. And for the educators, they're being turned on to the idea that I can use the curriculum that we build as a vehicle for teaching standards-based, project-based learning.
Mm, wow. So it's making it so that they're learning through the games. Is that what
Learning
I'm
through the games, learning by unpacking, how the games are made. The It's called the United States Academic Esports League for a reason, because if these kids just needed a vehicle to play games, they don't need me, right? They can stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, on drinking Mountain Dew, eating hot Cheetos. They don't need my help with that right there. The idea of turning, you know, an opportunity into creating beneficial outcomes that have meritorious value, that right there is kind of what we do at, we call it the USAEL, the United States Academic Esports League.
wow, great. And how does somebody join that?
So we have a website, usacademicesports.com. Go visit, find out if there are, you know, kids that right now, you know, we've got Marvel Rivals and Fortnite. There's chess competitions. There's
Mhm.
Minecraft. So we've got like tons of the popular games, Smash, etc. So we're a little game agnostic in a way. Whatever the kids want to play, we try to avail them of those opportunities. But the soul underneath is, how can I get my kid using all this energy to kind of meaningfully, you know, advance transferable skills, because the workforce is being reimagined by gamification. Artificial intelligence, it's not even an area that exists in a silo, because from agriculture to fintech finance right there to health tech, to, you know, everything we're talking about, AI is starting to touch it across the board. Nvidia, the most valuable company on the planet right now, at the heartbeat of creating chips for AI, started as a gaming company right there. So the connections between gaming and AI, they have a kind of a long history right there. And when we teach this to students.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. It's a really great initiative to really to get to this to get to kids and to get them to build the skills they need in the future. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so you know, you've had classroom experience, you have some leadership experience in being with the state of California. And now you're in a CEO role. So, how do you apply your emotional intelligence in those different areas?
Um, well, as a CEO, I think that it's very important to be, sort of
Mm,
in service to the folks you work with, in a way, right? Like, empowering them, setting them up to win is, a big area where I try to focus. Of course, there's the other side of things that at the end of the day, somebody's gotta make a decision because not everybody's gonna agree on the direction we need to go or the different, pathways that are available, or which direction, and so there's that juggling of being a listener, being a listener, being a listener, and then being a decision maker and being a communicator and things like that that go back and forth. And on one hand, um, I'm, you know, I think well equipped to be a listener, but also on another hand, that I'm also always like I kinda have a people pleaser side of me, and that is a slippery slope because, unfortunately, you're never going to be able to please everybody
mhm,
right there.
mhm,
So that, comes with kind of this idea of clarity is kindness. Because ultimately, I think what I've discovered is that you can tell people things they don't wanna hear as long as you're transparent and forthright and not manipulating and things like that. Like, "Look, I just have some news that you might not like, this might not run, but at least you're hearing it, and you're hearing it directly from me, and you have an open line to discuss it, and here's this and that, but you're not operating under a false belief that there's gonna be some kind of unicorn event that's gonna swing things that go the way that I think I'm sensing you want them to go, like, that's just not where we are right now. So having that kind of, like, toggle, and it's a consummate challenge, and I'm certainly wildly imperfect at it,
yeah,
in a way, but I think that what counts at the end of the day is the intention, and if it being intentional about the idea of really caring what other people think, and then also you I'm wildly aware of I work with a lot of smart people that are particularly smarter than I am in different domains, right? That's like trying to bring people on board that complement one another and complement, like we don't need 30 more mad scientists on our team because I sort of love playing that role of being the mad scientist, right? We need we need people who like the peas don't touch the mashed potatoes so that we can execute and operate and things like that right there. So that's another side um of it is recognizing, I think, what are my own sort of deficiencies and strengths, and how can I bring people on board that can make us a better team by playing those roles.
mhm, mhm. Um, I know that you're a published author, I think 23 books, I think you've published. Amazing. But I read in, your bio a little bit about how you spent 14 years fighting rejection until you finally became a professional writer. And that takes incredible emotional resilience. That's part of that emotional intelligence again. So how do you help your team or your students really have that same tenacity where we're in a world where AI can give instant gratification, do things that used to take days and hours and now it's instantaneous. How do we keep that tenacity going?
Um, I I can't answer for other people. For me, there's a side of it that is the work meaningful?
Mm,
And that is what at the end of the day, like, because it doesn't matter what you endeavor to pursue, right? If you from owning a pizza shop to starting a technology company to writing a book, whatever the case may be, you're going to face obstacles, adversity, etc. And the thing that I think enables people to push through is like, I believe in my grandma's pizza recipe, and I believe in keeping the family tradition alive, and I believe and this and that, and I know this pizza's awesome, and I'm gonna find my pizza audience right there. So when the pipe breaks in the bathroom and you just open the shop and the plumber is not responding to your call, and those kind of, those inevitable life curveball hit, you gotta go back to what am I doing here and why am I doing it? And if the answer truly is coming from an authentic space inside of you, then finding the determination to just take one more step becomes available to all of us. If you're not coming from that space right there of the meaningfulness, then that's probably where you will start to hear the, "Yeah, I'm just gonna throw it in. Just gonna
Mhm.
throw in the towel," right? Like that's kind of, I think, it right there. Like, for me, I just was a writer. I've always been a writer, and it just was, I'm figuring out how to, they locked the door, they locked the windows, they locked the chimney, I dug a hole, I dug this, and then suddenly, I burrowed a tunnel. And wait a minute, it's like I finally got in type of thing. And I'm not alone in that idea for many people who have achieved something in their life.
Yeah. Well, we're pretty close to time. What's one thing you wish more people understood about the role of emotional intelligence, the human touch, when you're preparing young people or people entering the workplace in this AI driven world?
I think the one thing that I would advocate for is developing a healthy relationship with your own fear. In my belief system, I often find that fear is an incredible component of my inner narrative when it comes to decision making. And when I'm triggered, when I'm angry or worried or ruminating or all this different stuff, it's because I hold a fear about something. And the fear could, if you go to inner child work, it could come from, trauma from, decades ago. It could be a very reasonable thing about, the health and well-being of people I love, whatever. But when fear is at the steering wheel of my decision making, I very often find that it leads me to places that I probably wouldn't choose if open-heartedness and love was at the center of my decision making. So
Mm.
that right there is and if you can be in touch with yourself enough to understand, like, am I pursuing whatever this endeavor is from a space of love, right? Or am I pursuing this from a space of fear? To know that and be able to distinguish, and because when you're making choices from that heart-based space out of love, uh, that's when you feel aligned. That's when you feel purposeful. That's when that meaningfulness comes in. That's when that, like, you know what, right? The door was locked. I'm looking for the window. The window is closed. I'm trying the chimney, right? Because the love of the endeavor is going to find my way to the tunnel. But when the door is locked and you're coming from fear, then you say, well, I'll break the window. Well, I'll burn down the house. Well, I'll do, and then you start pursuing endeavors in ways that don't match up with of your own personal values. And that's when it doesn't work out.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, Alan, with us today. I really appreciate it. And you're great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.